Okay. Let's talk about The Last of Us Season 2, episodes 1 through 3. I was debating if I was going to actually discuss this season, but with all the stuff that's been happening lately, I decided, why not? Now, the first thing we're going to mention here is that we're going to go through episodes 1 and episode 2 pretty quickly. And then we're going to focus on episode 3 just because of recency bias. I wasn't really taking notes during episode 1 and 2 because I wasn't planning on doing reviews of the episodes. But by episode 3, I decided to. So that's why you see episode 3 here on the topics list is much longer than the other two. But the first thing we're going to talk about here is a little bit outside the happenings of the individual episode. If you have been on this channel before, then you might have seen my previous videos tracking the culture war surrounding Intergalactic, the Heretic Prophet. This is the next franchise being developed by the same video game studio that developed The Last of Us franchise. In this video, I basically go over the construction of anti-fan communities. We see an anti-fan community being constructed for the purposes of the culture war surrounding this latest game with a female protagonist. And we also saw The Last of Us Part 2, the video game, not the TV show, become a major figure in the Gamergate culture war. It was positioned during its development on places like 4chan as being a symbol of the modern woke DEI encroachment on masculine entertainment, and so on and so forth, with various forms of political complaints coming in and being synthesized and merged into one in this grand Gamergate cultural anti-Western conspiracy theory. Now, we're not going to be talking about, rehashing all of that here. But in short, on my channel, we have knowledge about the phenomena that occur on the internet, the very interesting ways in which foreign governments, as well as domestic ideologies, have really targeted the gamer community as being the heart of the online right-wing alternative media sphere. If you don't believe me, I also have another video on Steve Bannon and the origins of Gamergate back in 2005 with World of Warcraft and the pay-to-win company that Steve Bannon was a part of there, with him getting a real interest in the gamer community as recognizing them as a community that is very willing and ready to be activated politically if only someone would dare to activate them. So long story short, Last of Us Part 1 was received very, very well in 2013. By 2020, the political landscape online was very different. The Last of Us Part 2 was released not without a series of conspiracy theories concerning feminism, concerning liberalism, concerning race, gender, the insertion of political motives where they ought not to be inferred, were all commonplace concerning the release of the second installment in the Last of Us video game franchise. The game was, from what I can remember, almost universally review bombed upon its release, even though, in my opinion, it's one of the greatest stories and greatest technical feats ever achieved in video game history. Now we move into 2025. There has been 5 years of culture war surrounding The Last of Us Part 2, with it being probably the main figure in that video game culture war. If you're an American, you know all about the culture war that's been going on, the anti-woke hysteria that's been prominent in these YouTube, podcasting, and gaming communities. They're not really gamers. They're not really fans of movies and television. They're just using it as a means of garnering views for their political commentary and making money on the internet. With the release of The Last of Us TV show, there was a tapping into of two sorts of demographics. Well, actually three. So there are three demographics that are heavily involved in discourse of The Last of Us Part 2 online. First, you have that very small but very loud anti-woke community. They are political opportunists. They use The Last of Us with its centralization of female characters, with the death of a beloved male character, with the features of a homosexual relationship in the show as pillars of their criticism of Western society. This group of people is heavily influenced by foreign actors. We looked at Operation Doppelganger in our video on Steve Bannon and Gamergate on how Russia specifically has recognized the power of the online gaming community as being a core for spreading anti-liberal, anti-Western ideas amongst the internet population. The second group we have is the just general gamers. Most of them tend to have fond feelings towards The Last of Us, the casual watchers of the show, the super fans of the show, the casual gamers, and the super fans of the game itself. I would say that is the majority of the individuals who are engaged with the video games and the TV show. And then we have the leftist version of the anti-woke Gamergate crowd. I haven't decided what to call them yet, but these people were created out of a reaction and defensiveness to what the anti-woke crowd, their smear campaign against various IPs in entertainment, specifically, we're talking here today, The Last of Us Part 2. This group of people has targeted Season 2 alongside the anti-woke crowd, but for different reasons. Now, I know I'm rambling here, but please, it's necessary for me to get through this because we're going to be talking about some controversies in episode 3 that won't make sense when I discuss them unless you know the context of what's going on in the culture war surrounding this game. Now, when The Last of Us Part 2 was in development, there were leaks concerning the story. From what I remember, the leaks originated on 4chan, and they were framed in such a way to be flammable, tender, right, for the culture war. I remember there being leaks that there was a transgender muscular woman as one of the playable characters. This would turn out to be Abby in the video game. She's not transgender. She's just a muscular woman in the video games, amongst other things that were told and leaked about the story. Now, when the game finally then released, we open up to Abby and Ellie. We play a little bit of Abby, play a little bit of Ellie, and we play a little bit of Joel. Unfortunately, Joel dies very early on, as we see in episode 2. Joel dies in the game, being beaten to death by Abby after she captures him for what he did to her father. This angered a lot of hardcore fans, and it proved as a useful narrative thing to focus on for the anti-woke crowd. With the anti-woke crowd saying that the death of Joel was done to emasculate men because he was killed by a woman, and it was a result of having too much feminine influence on the narrative. Whereas the hardcore fans who weren't as much concerned with the culture war stuff were just upset that a beloved character who you played as throughout the first game would die in such a brutal fashion in the second game, and you would be forced to play as two other characters. These two groups of people kind of worked together such that criticism of the narrative of the second game was heavily weighed down by a bunch of illegitimate culture war nonsense. It made it very difficult to tell who was actually criticizing the game with valid concerns versus who was simply tapping into that culture war mentality. Now, since 2020, the culture war hasn't slowed down. We have a culture war-based presidential administration in office at the moment, and The Last of Us Season 2 has released. There are some controversies coming in from the anti-woke crowd. There are some controversies coming in from the anti-woke crowd that I believe are illegitimate, which we see listed at the bottom of episode 3. So that is the general context of where The Last of Us is in the culture war. It is a franchise that is being held down and unnecessarily weighed down by a bunch of political conversations that shouldn't really be in the picture. So I thought I'd give my review of this TV show with the context of all of that, being aware of all of that, not ignoring it, but at the same time, enjoying the show as it has been designed. So let's begin with episode 1. We begin The Last of Us Season 2 with Bella Ramsey deleting her Twitter account, or not her Twitter account, her social media in general. She leaves social media entirely. This is as a result of the culture war coming in from those two groups I described earlier. The anti-woke crowd has always hated Ellie since the second installment of the video game was released in 2020. Now, the anti-woke crowd, who was born out of a defensiveness against the anti-woke crowd, hates Bella Ramsey. So the anti-woke gaming crowd hates the gaming character, and the anti-woke crowd hates the actress for the TV show. And of course, the anti-woke crowd also hates the actress for the TV show. So the reason being, on the anti-woke side, is because Ellie's physicality, the physical design of her character, her body, and so on and so forth, looks a little bit something like this. So Ellie looks something a little bit like this in the video games. She is not as small as Bella Ramsey. She is taller. She looks a bit older than Bella Ramsey looks. And Abby looks like this. She is a physically imposing woman. She is very large, much larger than Ellie. So these are the two appearances of the main characters of The Last of Us Part 2, Ellie and Abby. Of course, the characters in the TV show do not look like this. Ellie looks like that, and Ellie looks like this. Abby looks a bit closer to what she looks like in the video game, but Bella Ramsey does not match Ellie from the video game's appearance. Now, the reason why this got pulled into the culture war is because Ellie and Abby's appearance was a target by the anti-woke crowd, with the anti-woke crowd having a particular offense to Abby's physically imposing appearance, and with them for some reason coping and trying to say that Ellie was ugly in the second game. This became a hard line in the sand for the anti-woke crowd, with them saying Abby and Ellie's appearance suit the game. They are as they are. They are what the writers intended for the characters to look like. And then, with the release of the TV show, neither Abby nor Ellie appear as they did in the game. This caused a bit of a scramble between the two crowds, the two political crowds online, with the anti-woke crowd saying that HBO did a good job making Abby less muscular and more attractive for the male gaze, and with them hounding on Bella Ramsey, and with the anti-woke crowd saying that HBO bent the knee to the culture war by changing Abby's appearance, and that Ellie is not as physically imposing as she was in the video game either, which was them also bending the knee. I personally am against this form of consuming media, this over-moralization, over-politicization, this insertion and superstition that everything writers do, everything that happens in a TV show or a video game or a movie is motivated by some sort of covert but inexplicably planned political motive to undermine one group or the other. We're very pro creativity on this channel. We want writers to write what comes to them naturally and to not feel threatened or bogged down by the political opinions of a small but very vocal minority of people online. So in episode 1, Abby's muscles are gone, but personally, I think it also works because Ellie is also smaller. In comparison, the difference between the two women would have been extremely noticeable and almost comical if Abby had been large like she was in the game. Even in the game, it's kind of a little bit comical how strong Abby is physically compared to Ellie. That's the point. But it would have been comical in a bad way if the TV show had stuck with someone very huge for Abby and with Bella Ramsey as Ellie. I believe in episode 1 that tensions between Joel and Ellie are much more clear. Everything seems to flow nicely and more pleasantly. I've just gotten The Last of Us Part 2 on PC. I haven't played it since it originally came out in 2020, shortly before I sold my PlayStation for a gaming computer. This was one of the games that I made sure to play before I got rid of that. So yeah, the tension between Ellie and Joel flows much nicer. There's been some repositioning of the narrative. If you haven't played the game sort of starts off with a brief moment of calm, but then things just spiral out of control very quickly. We spend the majority of the game not understanding why Abby killed Joel. But then at some point in the game, we switch over to Abby's perspective, we play as her, and we learn what Joel meant to her. In the TV show, we learn about Abby's motives up front, right away, at the beginning of the series. This, I think, is a good thing. I know some people have been complaining that the narrative is being shifted around and things are being repositioned. But one of the criticisms of The Last of Us Part 2, the video game, was that many people they just didn't enjoy playing as Abby. And the reason is because she kills Joel. We don't know the reason why. And then we're forced to play as her for many hours, slowly learning why she killed Joel. Now, I think that was a good storytelling exercise, but a lot of people were very, very hurt emotionally by Joel's death, and they just didn't like the fact that for the majority of their time playing the game, they were playing as someone that they hated and they didn't understand their motivations for what they were doing. This kind of criticism was, again, like I said earlier, wrapped up in a lot of culture war nonsense, but it shows a lot of clarity of mind and the ability to receive criticism that the writers of the TV show were able to extract sort of the areas that could have been fine-tuned in the video game to present a story that is more well-received while not, getting rid of things that are in the story and compromising the story that is being told. Another bullet point that I had for episode 1, remember I said I'm going through episode 1 and 2 quickly. From this point on, we'll be going a little bit faster. The scene with Ellie and Dina fighting the clickers. I thought it was hilarious. I like that Dina has a stronger presence in the TV show. In the video game, Dina definitely felt like a cringy plot device to me personally. There was no chemistry between Ellie and Dina in the video game. Personally, that's how I felt. In the TV show, this is completely different. Dina seems like an actual human being with a personality that works very well with Ellie's. They're very young, so there's a lot of that youthful playfulness, but at the same time, they're in the apocalypse, so they have some qualities about them that are very mature, which makes for a funny dynamic between the two of them. So overall, Dina and Ellie, I think that's an improvement from the video games in the TV show. I think learning about Abby's motives up front is an improvement from the video game. And the last bullet point I had before we get to the last bullet point, I just got reminded by looking at this video here. Joel and Ellie had a strained relationship ever since the end of the first game. However, the extent of the strain and the regret that Ellie had for her relationship with Joel towards the end was explored throughout the entirety of the second game. And remember, the second game is it takes a while to complete. It's not a short game. It's a very long story. It's like you play as two characters, but it's not the length of one game split into two, one for Ellie's side and one for Abby's side. It's like two full-length games for each character. So it's a game that's like double the amount of time of an already long subgenre in video games, which is the cinematic narrative subgenre of video games. Them going into the awkwardness and the regrets, but the desire to connect, but they can't connect, and the therapy, we'll talk about more of that later. I think it's a tremendously good change that they made from the video games. From a lot of the criticism of the video games, it seems like a lot of people played it very, very fast. When I believe The Last of Us Part 2 is a game that should be played with, it's like when you eat something expensive, you kind of taste it, you let it melt on your tongue. You don't just scarf it down like you would fast food. I think The Last of Us Part 2 is like that. It's not a game that you rush through. It's a game where a lot of the world building is built through you exploring the environment in each level, reading journals, listening to recordings, really taking in the story that's being told to you. Because in the TV show you have complete control over what the audience sees and does, rather than spreading a ton of information around levels, they can really pick and choose what they focus on, and they chose to focus on Joel and Ellie's relationship up front before Joel is gone from the story entirely, and we don't have him anymore to have any of that. So I very much like what they did with Joel. Anyone who has I saw a lot of people who had awkward relationships with their own parents, they very much appreciated what was being done here with Joel and Ellie. Lastly, this scene right here, this is an iconic scene. It's one of the first, I think we see it in the very first trailer for The Last of Us Part 2. This exact shot here, just in the video game. I also put a note here that the song playing during this was by Crooked Still, called Ecstasy. This is a song that was actually on my Spotify. I was recommended it by Spotify at one point for some reason, and I liked it and I saved it. And I was very happy to hear that being played in the episode. So shout out to whoever was in charge of the track being played during this party. We love that music. All right, so it took us almost 25 minutes to get to episode 2. Episode 2 starts off with a flashback from Abby. Here is what I was mentioning. We learn Abby's motivations for having a grudge against Joel. A little bit of backstory. Ellie is immune to the clicker bites, the zombie infection. She's immune because her mother was bitten while she was pregnant with her. Presumably, that's how it happened. There are a very limited amount of medical professionals and researchers in the world who can find a cure for this clicker infection, this fungi that has been infecting humans and turning them into zombies. There was a hospital in Seattle with some doctors who were able to perform an operation on Ellie, do research, and hopefully create a vaccine and save humanity. Because Ellie would be killed in the process of this medical research, Joel, at the end of the first game, decides to kill everyone in the hospital, including the very valuable doctors and researchers there, and rescue Ellie, and also lie to her that there was no cure, there was no way to find a cure. We leave the first game with conflicted but very warm feelings toward Joel. Joel is a very good father who saved his daughter from certain death. But if we zoom out from our personal perspective, Joel is an enemy of humanity. So he's a good father, but he is an enemy of humanity because he would not allow these doctors to find a cure for this fungal infection that turns human beings into zombies and has wreckaged human civilization, because of his own personal love for Ellie as a daughter. In part 2 of the video game, we learn that although Ellie accepted Joel's explanation that there was nothing they could have done and that he didn't do anything, the doctors just, let him take her out, she understood that Joel killed the doctors and rescued her. And in part 2, she has a strained relationship with Joel because of that, because Ellie wanted to be a martyr. She wanted to sacrifice her life and give her life meaning by being the one whose body became ground zero for finding the vaccine. But Joel took that away from her and forced her to continue living in this zombie-infected world with no hope for a vaccine as far as we can tell. Abby is the daughter of the lead surgeon involved in the medical effort to find a vaccine using Ellie. Joel killed him at the end of the first game, and ever since then, Abby has been looking for Joel to enact vengeance against him for killing her father, of course, and for the selfish act of preventing a vaccine for being created. The video game attempts to put you in the shoes of Abby literally by making you play as her without knowing her motivations for killing Joel at the beginning of the game, and slowly over the course of the game, you come to understand her perspective when you play as her. Unfortunately, this wasn't received well by some members of the gaming community. They just really hated Abby for the majority of the game, and they weren't swayed in her favor because of the intense love that they had for Joel. I think showing her motivation up front before Joel is killed, showing what he did and the severity of what he did, all up front, retelling it from her perspective right away in the show was another good change. I hate that you have to spell it out for people, but we don't want to go through the same arguments we had over the way The Last of Us Part 2 story was told. And I think they extracted the salient criticisms of the video game and implemented them here. I thought the opening scene was beautiful with Abby here walking with her gun. It was very fun seeing scenes that were in the video game being played out live. This is the scene in the video game where we see the homophobic guy who made a ruckus at the party the previous night, attempting to apologize to Abby. I actually disliked the way that this scene was done in the TV show in comparison to the way that it was done in the game. So let me just play briefly what the scene looked like in the video game. So here's the scene. I'll just let it play for you guys here so you can see what I'm talking about. I think it's a lot more humorous. I don't know, just the pacing and the reactions and the voice acting. I found this scene incredibly funny when I was playing the game. Ellie's reactions, her little side comments under her breath. I just feel like in the TV show, it lacked a lot of that humor that the game had. So yeah, when I was watching the TV show, I just noticed that and wanted to show it to you guys here. So here's how the video game scene plays out.
Come here. Seth's got something he wants to say to you.
I don't want to hear what that bigot has to say.
Do it for me, please.
Fine.
Seth. Seth, come here.
Fuck me.
Hey. Look, last night I was drinking too much.
Sure.
I'm trying to say I'm sorry. Maria tells me that you and Dina are headed out. I made you some sandwiches.
Okay.
They're steak.
Thank you, Seth.
Yeah, well, you be safe out there.
Yep.
I appreciate that.
What you got there?
Bigot sandwiches.
Smells good.
So that's the scene from the video game. And then the scene in the TV show plays out similarly, but I just don't think it was as funny and character building as we had in the video game there. Now, in the video game, it's also important to know when we get to episode 3, there's a controversy surrounding that guy. This is the only scene we see of this homophobic guy. This is the last, not the only scene, this is the last scene we see of him. The first scene we saw was him, his reaction to Ellie and Dina at the party, and then this is the last we see of him. In the TV show, they've actually added additional scenes of him helping out Ellie and Dina later on. So that sparked a little bit of controversy on the side of the anti-woke crowd, who, once again, as I explained earlier, are feeling as though HBO is bending the knee to the invalid culture war criticisms coming in from the anti-woke hysteria side of things. Okay, so that's it for the sandwich scene. Let's see what we have up next. Here. The famous Abby chase scene. This was amazing. My favorite part of the episode. Yes, even more than Joel's death scene. The sense of scale in this scene, as well as the Jackson invasion, you can really tell that the creators of The Last of Us are drawing from the historical knowledge that HBO has from working on Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon. That industry knowledge is being put to work. This is the benefit of having a show being on a prestigious studio with lots of money and lots of talent, such as HBO. I know with my Yellow Jackets review, I complain that TV shows take too long to make. I'm not against TV shows taking a long time. That's how you get stuff like House of the Dragon and The Last of Us. So this is it put to good use in this situation. I felt that the Jackson invasion, again, like I said, I haven't played the video game since 2020. I just got it on PC, but I'm literally right here in the game, playing as Abby in this scene. I don't remember a Jackson invasion in the video game. I think that was new in order to give Tommy, Joel's brother, more characterization, more importance, and more influence in the story, as he is also a beloved character. So yeah, this chase scene with Abby and the zombies, I loved it. The Last of Us is a video game where you never, at least when I played it, you never have enough. You sneak around, you eliminate zombies. You're also fighting humans, not zombies, at the same time in various parts of the game. But you never have enough to just like shoot down crowds of zombies and crowds of people. You have like 10 bullets, a Molotov, a brick, and a knife. And so when this happens in the video game, it's very, very tense. And I felt that in the TV show as well. So I'm very glad that that aspect of the video game is being preserved in the TV show. The fact that you cannot withstand the nature of life in The Last of Us directly. You need to be strategic. You need to be conservative with your resources. And in this case, you need to be fast, like Abby. Okay, yes. So, like I said, the narrative has been reorganized in the TV show compared to the game. Again, I'm sorry, I can't remember everything that happened in the video game. I only remember the overall story. I don't remember exactly how Abby and the Wolf faction captured Joel in the video game. I only remember playing as Ellie and then finding Joel to be captured. But I know that this, how they did in the TV show, is not how it played out in the game. Dina was not there. This entire scene was not there. But I like this change a lot. I like how the chase scene converged with the patrol that Dina and Joel were on. I like how Abby sort of had to play it cool. She figured out who these people are. They didn't know who she was. And she led them directly back to her camp where they would be captured. And eventually Joel would be killed. I really like this. It made sense. Her reasoning, her excuse for having to bring Joel back to her camp made sense. The reveal of who she was made sense. I really liked this change. And I like how Dina is having, again, more of a presence as an actual character. Again, this is just the Jackson invasion. It reminded me a lot of Game of Thrones in an okay way. I thought the scene was very nice. I liked it. However, I don't know how to describe it. There was something about it that felt like it was taking the place of something else in the story, even though it didn't. It felt like filler, even though it wasn't. And I haven't thought about why that was, but this scene definitely felt like eye candy and filler to me, which is not so bad. One of the criticisms of narrative-driven games like The Last of Us that are very cinematic is that they are walking simulators. The player is tasked with a lot of walking and a lot of listening to dialogue, almost as if they're watching a TV show. So for the TV show to add more action than there was in the video game is them responding to some of the criticisms of the game and also adapting things for the television genre. But I felt like the Jackson invasion felt like filler to me, even though it wasn't filler. It serves a purpose in the narrative that is very clearly defined in episode 3. Next, the intergalactic actress. I showed you guys earlier, Intergalactic, the Heretic Prophet, is an up-and-coming video game out by Naughty Dog. This is the trailer for that video game that was released about 4 months ago. And this is that same actress you see here. So she's been given a role in the TV show. I found this interesting. I wanted to note it, aside from just a cameo, I love the fact that Neil Druckmann and Naughty Dog are providing a track for these video game actors to transition into real cinematic prominence as characters in the video games that they also voice acted and motion captured for. They're not just being all recasted, right? Of course, she wasn't in The Last of Us, I think. I didn't look it up. I don't think she was the voice actress for Nora. But the fact that the woman who motion capped for Ellie and who is Ellie in the video games, who voice acts the iconic actress, plays Ellie's mother in the TV show. And now the lead actress for the video game Intergalactic: The Heretic Prophet is acting in a role in the Last of Us TV show on HBO as well. I just find it to be, I like that. I like that these industries are trading with one another, that they are working together, and that people in one industry who have shown that they have the skills and they are high caliber are not just being left behind in the gaming industry. I don't, not as if the gaming industry is something to be left behind in, but they're getting, you know, an elevation into a more prominent industry, which is the film industry. So I'm good to see that. I'd love to see more voice actors and motion capture actors being able to steward and play characters related to the characters they played in the game itself. It's just nice when your boss, you know, one of your former bosses, drags you along into their new projects. It shows some love and care for the characters. Not just throwing people away, but treating them as people who contributed to the success of this great story that is being told. And at the end of the episode, we have Abby and Joel together. Abby captures Joel. I chose this scene because I didn't like this one line from Abby. She calls Joel handsome. That was not in the game. I found it to be cringe. I didn't like this scene at all. I like the overall scene, this line in the scene. I didn't like it. I know they're trying to make her seem like creepy and weird and psychopathic, and in awe of the fact that she finally captured this man who she's been hunting for years. But it was just out of character for Abby to call Joel handsome. I think so. But not that big of a deal. But it was something that stuck out to me like a sore thumb. And then, of course, Joel's death. The changes to Joel's death scene, I felt were also not that big of a deal. I remember the scene of Abby killing Joel in the first game being extremely powerful, both narratively and in terms of the cinematography of what was going on in the video game. In that scene, you see things from Ellie's eyes perspective of her horizontal on the ground with her face pressed to the ground. You see things from her eyes. So I'm going to put the scene of the video game up here so you guys can see what it kind of looked like. You're kind of on the floor with Ellie for a lot of it. You see things from her perspective, just as you see in the TV show. Again, this just shows Abby's physically imposing. She's very large, muscular. We see her beating Joel to death with a golf club. In the video game, in the TV show, she stabs him to death eventually. But I remember this scene being very, very powerful in the video game. In the TV show, I felt like they captured 90 to 95% of the magic of that scene from the game. I saw some people complaining on Twitter that like there were changes made. I think the changes made were to the actual death scene were insignificant. The only thing that I liked less in the TV show than in the game was the cinematography. You see here in the game, it's a lot of, everyone standing, Ellie on the ground. You see, Abby standing, towering over the other and so on and so forth. In the TV show, it just plays out slightly differently in terms of the cinematography, but overall, I liked it. I don't know how I felt about Owen and all of them seeming really disgusted and distraught with what Abby was doing. I understand why they've chosen to accentuate that, because this story of The Last of Us Part 2, which is going to extend through 2 seasons in the TV show, is a story about the futility of revenge and blood feuds and grudges, and so on and so forth, for the purposes of taking your pain away. So understand why they've shown that Abby is acting in a very cruel and torturous manner toward Joel. The lack of humanity in the way that she killed him. I understand why they're doing that, because they're going to do the same thing with Ellie as we see her progressively descend into a fever and frenzy of vengeance and rage and blood feud against Abby throughout season 2 and 3 of The Last of Us. So I understand why they did it here, but that just wasn't really in the game. From what I remember, the members of Abby's faction were delighted with the fact that she was killing and torturing Joel the way that she was. I heard someone, I think it was Grace Randolph, saying Abby was never cruel. Yeah, let's just pull this tweet up here. Grace Randolph, I respect her. I listen to her stuff in the background while I do other things for many years now. She said, "I'm not going to cover The Last of Us season 2 and will probably stop watching this show." She said this after episode 2. I really disliked last night's episode, despite liking cutscenes of part 2 in the game quite a bit. This is an important sentence that I will bring up later in episode 3. Not in relation to Grace Randolph, but in relation to the anti-woke and the anti-woke crowd. Abby was never cruel, but I see a lot of people enjoyed Dever's performance, so don't want to be critical of it. Random person responded, "What? I played the game twice, so I can't differentiate between the cutscenes and the game itself, but Abby was a monster at the beginning and was salivating at killing Joel," where she says, "You don't get to rush this," the same thing she said in the death scene. And then Grace just says, "Disagree," like a Giga Stacy. I disagree, without any explanation there whatsoever. I just wanted to mention that here. Keep it in your mind as we look at the controversies at the end of episode 3. In short, I have a suspicion that a lot of people have gotten into The Last of Us Part 2, either through Reddit posts and 4chan posts and YouTube anti-woke content surrounding Last of Us Part 2 without actually playing the game for themselves. And I also feel like there's another segment of the fan base who got into The Last of Us through fan fiction, fan arts, fandom, and watching cutscenes on YouTube without actually playing the game for themselves either. Both groups of these people have a warped perspective of the narrative of the game, in my opinion. And I think that will explain some of the controversies we are seeing in episode 3 beginning to sprout as this second wave of culture war surrounding The Last of Us continues to develop.